Labour's view now. The party's Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, joins us now live from central London. I'm keen to talk to you about a whole range of issues, including strikes, but just to pick up on something we were just talking about with Siobhan in the interview just there. She was saying that there's no point about talking about getting people back into the workplace without talking about childcare. And you want a guaranteed childcare, don't you, for all parents of children aged between 9 months to 11 years. How would that work?
Well, we have been listening to business and parents about what's holding them back and what's holding back our economy. And that does involve making sure that we've got a modern childcare system that reflects the needs of parents and children and how they live their lives today. So we are looking at how we fundamentally rethink how we deliver childcare in our country. So from the end of parental leave right through to the end of primary school. And the first step we've set out around that is making sure we deliver breakfast clubs for all primary school children in England, because it's important that we get the early years right, and we'll have more to say on that. But also parents know that their childcare problems don't end when their children start at school. And so many women, and sadly women in particular that I speak to, are giving up jobs they love or are cutting back on their hours because childcare just isn't there, and it's holding back our economy. If you're serious about growth, you've got to be serious about delivering a modern childcare system too.
You know what, I'm going to have to pivot very quickly because we've had some breaking news through, and you will understand when you hear what that news is. We've heard from the UK Prime Minister on Nadhim Zahawi, and if you remember, he's asked his ethics advisor to look into whether or not Nadhim Zahawi broke the ministerial code in relation to his tax affairs. He's put out a statement where he says it's clear that there has been a serious breach of the ministerial code. He says, as a result, I've informed you of my decision to remove you from your position in government. So that there is a letter from the Prime Minister to Nadhim Zahawi saying that he has been removing him from government. So he's effectively been sacked from the government because it is clear to the Prime Minister that there has been a breach of the ministerial code. I'm going to bring you the full letters just as soon as I can. But Bridget Phillipson, what's your immediate reaction to that?
Well, it's not clear to me what the Prime Minister has been waiting for. It's been as plain as day for weeks now that this was going to be the outcome, but because of Rishi Sunak's weakness, his weakness within his own party and his failure to put the country first as a result, it's taken a very long time to get here. It's just a shame it's taken him so long that our country continues to be sucked into this mire of sleaze that the Conservatives are delivering for us. And, you know, when Rishi Sunak first became Prime Minister, he promised us integrity and accountability. I think we're a very, very long way away from that.
Just to bring you a bit more details from the full letter that we have now got. This letter from the Prime Minister to Nadhim Zahawi, dated today. He says, when I became Prime Minister last year, I pledged that the government I lead would have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. That is why, following new information which came to light in recent days regarding your personal financial arrangements and declarations, I asked the Lori Magnus, the independent advisor on ministers' interests, to fully investigate this matter. You agreed and undertook to cooperate fully with the inquiry. Following the completion of the independent advisor's investigation, the findings of which he has shared with us both, it is clear that there has been a serious breach of the ministerial code. As a result, I've informed you of my decision to remove you from your position in His Majesty's government. He goes on to say that Nadhim Zahawi should be extremely proud of his achievements over the 5 years, referencing the vaccine procurement programme in particular, and the fact that he is a Kurdish-born Iraqi refugee. That's something which people up and down this country have rightly valued, Rishi Sunak says in this letter. But just to summarise, it is clear this morning that the investigation has completed into Nadhim Zahawi. The findings have been shared with both the Prime Minister and Nadhim Zahawi himself. And as a result, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, says it's clear there has been a serious breach of the ministerial code, and as a result, he has been sacked from the government. Let's go back, shall we, to Bridget Phillipson. You say that it's taken the Prime Minister a long time to reach this conclusion. Has it? The investigation was finalised pretty quickly, and as soon as the results came in, he's gone.
He didn't need the advisor to tell him this, and it's just not clear to me why it's taken so long. But the sad truth is Nadhim Zahawi is one of a number of cases that we've seen in recent months in the Conservative Party. So I also look forward to the Prime Minister taking action against Dominic Raab, and I also look forward to the Prime Minister taking action against Suella Braverman, who herself was found to have broken the ministerial code. Rather than sack her, he invited her back into government. I mean, it is just a joke for the Prime Minister to suggest that somehow this is a government that has got integrity and accountability at its heart. They are riven with sleaze. They're just fighting it out constantly amongst themselves. And it's the British people who suffer as a result, because it's all about the Conservative Party and it's not about what's right for our country. We face really big challenges right now, but when you've got this constant infighting and when you've got a Prime Minister that is so weak he can't stand up for what's right, and he kind of outsources that judgment to others, I think it tells you everything you need to know about really why it is time for a change in Britain.
You say he's weak, but he has just sacked Nadhim Zahawi this morning after getting the evidence through. I guess those people...
I mean, he really had... Oh, he had no choice but to sack him, but he should have sacked him weeks ago. I mean, it was always going to end in this way. So, you know, why on earth aren't we also seeing action on Suella Braverman and Dominic Raab and, you know, all the scandal that continues to envelop Boris Johnson? This is not just one bad apple. This is right at the heart of the Conservative Party, and it speaks to the Prime Minister's weakness and his weak position within his own party, that as a result he can't put the country first.
Do you think that there is an argument that some close to Rishi Sunak might make that he is effectively doing a clean-up job from administrations that have gone before him? He wasn't told the full facts by Nadhim Zahawi, he claims, and also, of course, the Boris Johnson allegations that you referred to. He would argue, I guess, that those are more of a hangover from the previous administration that he is now having to deal with the consequences of.
Well, he's not doing a very good job at cleaning it up if this is what he's claiming, because the stench of sleaze just hangs around the Conservative Party. You know, yes, Nadhim Zahawi, but so many of them. And I think it speaks to a wider problem that you've had a government that's been in charge now for 13 years, which is ample time to build a better Britain. And rather than focusing on what the British people want right now, they're just mired in this kind of infighting and constant, you know, problems that they face within their own party. I think politics is about delivering for the British people. Right now with the Conservatives, that isn't what people are getting. You know, an NHS on its knees, our schools, often many of them crumbling, you know, terrible data that the government refuses to publish about the state of our schools, growth at a terrible level, and so many people held back. I think Britain's best days really do lie ahead of us, but I don't see how we get to that stronger and better position as a country with Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, with the fundamental weakness right at the heart of his government.
At the same time, you know, as we were talking before, Nadhim Zahawi has been sacked. You mentioned Dominic Raab. The allegations into him are being looked into. It is right that due process is followed in these very important matters, is it not?
Look, there is just so much here, of course, and, you know, due process is followed in the Nadhim Zahawi case, and due process has resulted in what we all knew was going to happen in the first place. I think it speaks to the Prime Minister's character and his judgment that he hasn't been prepared to act until now. He doesn't need to wait for other people to tell him what to do. He's the Prime Minister, for goodness sake. He should just get on with it.
He says, just to recap, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has effectively sacked Nadhim Zahawi from government. He's asked him, he has said that he's decided to remove him from his position in the government because it is clear, in his words, that there's been a serious breach of the ministerial code, that the letter from Rishi Sunak to Nadhim Zahawi over his tax affairs. Do you think that with all of the scrutiny of this story, that politicians should have to publish their tax returns?
I think the trouble with all of this, and partly why I think in a bizarre kind of way it suits the government, is it makes all politicians look as bad as one another. And I think there is a real risk that it undermines faith in politics and the ability of, you know, politicians to seek to make lives better for the people of our country and the people that we represent. I have no issue at all with the publication of tax returns when it comes to the Prime Minister and others. And Keir Starmer has set out today that he believes that the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Chancellor and their respective counterparts should publish their tax returns. I don't think that's particularly controversial. And, you know, my own tax return, there's nothing particularly interesting for anybody to see. It seems to be the likes of Nadhim Zahawi and others that have got something that they're wanting to hide.
So you'd be happy to publish your own tax return. I guess the other argument for some is that it might mean that people who have been in business or are wealthy people maybe put off entering Parliament.
I think if you're paying your taxes, you've got nothing to worry about. The trouble is we've had people at the heart of government, including those responsible for running our tax system, who haven't been doing what's expected of them. That's the trouble. But I think it's reasonable. In fact, I think it's a basic expectation of those in government that they should be following the rules that they set for others.
I have to say, one thing that I have found quite interesting from the letter is the very clear implication that Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadhim Zahawi. He hasn't allowed him the space to write his own letter of resignation or to leave on his terms. I mean, do you think this is Rishi Sunak trying to take charge of the situation?
I think he's desperately scrabbling around after weeks of failing to act. It was always going to come to this. We had this ludicrous spectacle at Prime Minister's Questions this week where Rishi Sunak was defending Nadhim Zahawi in effect. That was never going to be a tenable position for the Prime Minister. I think he's just underlined his own weakness within his party, that it's taken him so long to get to this point.
Now, we are going to stay on this story for the rest of the programme. We're talking to Sam Cates in just a minute, but I do just want to squeeze in one final question on the education strikes next week, because I know lots of parents watching this programme are going to be interested to know your answer on it. Schools are facing rolling strikes from this week. Are teachers right to walk out?
Well, like all parents, I don't want these strikes to go ahead. Of course, they will be disruptive, and I don't want children to miss time in school. But the reason that they're happening is because government ministers are refusing to negotiate seriously and find a settlement. There's still time for these strikes to be called off if government ministers are serious about getting around the table and trying to find a way through it. But parents will also know that teachers increasingly feel undervalued and underappreciated for the brilliant work that they do. That's what they tell me when I'm out speaking with teachers and school leaders. And over the last decade, we've had a government that hasn't taken education seriously as a priority for our country, and that's reflected in the fact that teachers have had real terms pay cuts. And unsurprisingly, given the wider pressures that we're seeing right now in the economy, they've come to the end of the road. So my strong advice to ministers would be the way that these strikes are to be called off is for serious and proper negotiation, and there is still time. So let's make it happen, and let's get to a position that everyone can live with. But right now, we've had 5 education secretaries in the last year, a total lack of seriousness in dealing with an issue that's been on the horizon since the summer. So we do need to get progress around this, but it falls to ministers, and at the minute they're just blaming others for their own failure to act.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Bridget Phillipson, a rather different interview this morning, I'm sure, than the one you were expecting to have. Good to talk.